Hello friends, welcome to my channel Logical Electrical. My name is Saurav. Today we will learn something new. In our last lecture, at the beginning of the last lecture, I have put forward you a question that why an electron is actually called an electron. But I actually didn't give you the proper answer to that question. And also in the last lecture we have also learned about a very brief history of electrostatics. I think you guys are very much smart about it and you already figured it out why an electron is actually called an electron, but still I want to tell you the proper answer regarding that. So actually if you follow my last lecture, then in that lecture I have talked about the most primitive electrical phenomena created by a human being is actually if you rubbing the amber into their hair and it can attract dry leaves. That is the most primitive electrical phenomena that is created by human being. So in that phenomena the amber plays a big role, and in today's and in modern perspective we know that in the world of electricity and magnetism, the electrons are actually plays a very good role to it. It actually the main role. Electron plays the main role of this world, electricity and magnetism. So in the primitive electrical phenomena, the amber is actually plays the big role there, which is most centralized role. So that's why to honor the amber, generally the electron is actually named after the Greek translation of the amber, which is known as the electron. So that's why the electron is actually called an electron. Also, at the end of my last lecture, I have also put forward your question that what is a charge? So in this lecture we would actually talk about that what is a charge. The crude definition of the charge is basically charge is one of the fundamental properties of elementary particles. Now I would just write it down the definition. Alright. So what is a charge? What is a charge? I will use my blue marker for indication purpose for this writing down this definition. So charge is basically, alright, this is actually the crude definition of the charge. That is, the charge is basically one of the fundamental property of elementary particles. Alright. So in this definition, two things may be unknown to us. What are these two things? What is the fundamental property of elementary particles? We do not know that. What are these fundamental properties? It says one of the. So what are these fundamental properties of elementary particles? And second thing is that what is these elementary particles are? So I will actually go one by one. So at first I will actually discuss about what are these elementary particles are. So let's go on a discussions of the elementary particles. Elementary particles. You can write it down the definition properly by pausing the video. Alright. So elementary particles, what are they? Actually the elementary particles are the particles which does not actually compose of any other particle. These particles do not actually comprises with any other particles. As the name suggests, they are quite elementary and basic. Okay, so these particles do not consist of any other particles. So these particles are the most basic or the most single particle, which not single actually. These particles actually, some of these particles are actually combined with each other, then they form a composite particles. Now these composite particles again somehow attach inside the atom, and they actually form some atom will actually create a molecule, then some molecules will create the whole universe. So these elementary particles are the very basic things in the nature. So I think you have already you are guessing that where I am actually talking about. I am talking about in the very basic of the universe, every of the existence. Not only universe, it's the existence, very basics of the existence. So just I'm writing down the definition of these elementary particles. elementary particles are basically, this is the thing, elementary particles are basically, okay, elementary particles are basically the particles which do not comprises or composed of any other particles. That is the crude definition of elementary particles. Okay, these particles. And what is the composite particles? If the elementary particles is like this, composite particles are actually made of elementary particles. A number of elementary particles are actually gathered together or accumulate together and they form the composite particles. For example, elementary particles example is actually the electron. Electron is one of the elementary particles, but whereas the proton and neutron is basically composite particles. Okay, if you please want to write it down the definition, then pause the video and please write it down. Alright. Okay. Now we would actually discuss about what are the classifications of the elementary particles are. Okay. Generally, elementary particles are actually classified into two categories. These are called the fermions and the bosons. Fermions are actually named after the American physicist Enrico Fermi, whereas the bosons are actually named after Indian physicist Satyendranath Bose. And the fermions are also known as the matter particles. Matter particles. But in bosons, they are also known as the force particles. Okay, fermions are again classified into two categories. These are called the quarks and the leptons. Our very old friend very old friend electron is actually lies inside this lepton category. Okay, generally quarks are actually there are 6 types of quarks in this whole universe. Quarks are up and down, charm and strange, top and bottom. These are the 6 categories that we actually found. These 6 particles are actually found that lies inside this quark category. Okay, generally using the up and down quarks, 2 up and 1 down quark make a proton, whereas 2 down quarks and 1 up quark actually made a neutron. So now we are discussing about the lepton categories. Okay, so I'm just writing this lepton category right here. Leptons, there are 6 leptons in this whole universe. So what are these? 6 leptons are actually electron, our old friend, muon, a new thing, and a tau, which is I presume new thing. So there's followed by there's a electron neutrino, muon neutrino, and the tau neutrino. There are 6 particles are there. Now inside the boson category, bosons are also classified into 2 categories. Okay, where do I write them? If you please write it down the lepton category, I will just clean it up on there. Okay. I think I would have some space over here. Bosons are actually classified into 2 categories. These are called the scalar boson. Scalar boson and a gauge boson. Okay. Now the gauge boson generally. Now in the gauge boson category, actually have you heard about photon? The photon particles which generally considered as it's coming from the sun. The photon particles is not actually coming from only the sun, it is like the light particles. To be more specific and basic way, we can consider as a light particle, the corpuscles of the light. Okay, generally that photon particles lies inside this gauge boson. Gauge bosons are generally 4 types: gluon, photon, Z and W boson. Okay. Scalar boson, there is only one scalar boson existed inside our universe, that is the Higgs boson. Symbolizes as H. Okay. Now that is the very basics of what are the classifications of the elementary particles are. So generally these particles made the complete universe. Alright, so there's a 6, 12 and there's a 16, 17 particles actually create the whole universe. So think about that. It's a quite remarkable thing that this particle actually made the whole universe. These 6 particles, these 2 up and down quarks made the proton, neutron, and this electron is actually the one of the leptons, which then they actually join together, form an atom, and then they form a molecule, then they form this whole entire universe. So it's a quite remarkable thing. So these are the very basics of the elementary particles. Now I wanted to give you a new insight about these elementary particles. What are these actually? You might think it's a quite bizarre thing. Actually it's advanced level physics. But to give you a very good interesting news about it, in the year of 2012, I think in the whole world there's a one news which is broadcasting there. The scientists in 2012, 4th July maybe, scientists actually found the God particles. Okay, this God particle is nothing but it's a Higgs boson. That is they actually found. Before 2012, it was the Higgs boson, the particle Higgs boson was theoretically proven that this particle might be exist in this very nature. But after 2012 in the CERN, one experiment is conducted, and there this Higgs boson particle existence is actually practically proven. And they actually found these are God particle. This particle name is basically the God particle. Okay, then I think you have very clear. I will not go to very deep into this elementary particle thing because you don't require that much. So for the sake of curiosity, I just for the definition of the charge and what is this elementary particles mean, so give you a very fundamental understandings. So I have just put forward you these things. There is the definition of elementary particles. What are the different kinds of and the classifications of elementary particles. One thing more, I want to tell you about the composite particles now. Okay. So I'm just rubbing down.
So what are these composite particles? Composite particles are quite different from these
elementary particles. Okay. So composite particles, what are they? Composite particles are basically made out of this elementary particle. That is quite interesting thing. It is like compound object. Okay, the different things are actually combined and then they actually form. So different kinds of elementary particles are combined with each other, then they form particles. Composite particles. Composite particles, to give a very example of composite particles, generally they are the protons and the neutrons. I have talked about it. The proton symbol is like this, and protons is actually consist of 2 up quark, 1 down quark. Oh, I have just forgot about this. The composite particles are actually made due to interactions of these fermions and bosons that we have actually previously discussed about it. Inside, the composite particles are only created when there's a fermions and boson both have to be existent. That is the prime condition for making these composite particles. Alright, both has to be existing. So generally the proton, which is one of the composite particles, which actually made out of two up quarks and a one down quark. Okay, now these are the fermions. Yeah, quarks are the fermions, all right. So what is actually now where is the bosons? Generally the bosons are actually held these quarks together, these three quarks together is known as the gluon. So this is the boson which holds these three quarks together. Okay, so this is the very structure of the proton, inside structure of the proton. These are the gluons, one of the bosons. And secondly, the neutron is also, the structure of neutron is quite different from the proton. So neutron is like this. A neutron is actually composed with two down quark and an up quark. So these quarks are also bound together by this gluon boson. Okay. They are held together by using this gluon. So this is the very structures of the neutron, and also already we have known that is electron is one of the leptons. So electrons are elementary particles. So this is the elementary particle. These three things made atom, and then you know what is actually then what happened. Universe is created. So I think that's a good insight of the elementary particles. What are they and what are the classifications of it? So to be a very sharp, basic and very brief summary of that of this actually thing, elementary particles. Elementary particles are the most elementary thing in the universe. These are the particles which do not consist of any other particles. So, and these particles are generally classified into two categories. These are called fermions and the boson. And fermions and the boson, and then fermions are again classified into two categories. These are called the quarks and the leptons. Quarks are the very basic. Up and down quarks are generally made these protons and neutrons. And leptons, inside the lepton category, the electron is present, very old friend of ours. And for the boson, the bosons are classified in two categories. These are called the scalar bosons and the Higgs boson. The scalar boson and the gauge boson. Inside the gauge boson, there is an old friend of ours, the light particle, photon. You have already heard about it. That lies inside that gauge boson thing. And scalar boson, there is only one scalar boson. There is a Higgs boson, and that is recently found out. And if you wanted to learn what is generally, I must tell you that these fundamental particles, these elementary particles that I have actually talked about these things, these particles are actually put inside a table which is known as a standard model of elementary particles. You can easily Google that and you would get a clear-cut picture about it, that it is basically a tabulated form. Inside that table, generally number of particles are actually present. They are actually categorized as the quarks, leptons, gauge bosons, scalar bosons, etc., etc. Okay, simply just search this thing, Google these things, and you will find a very clear-cut understandings what I am actually talk about you. Google it. Standard model of, this stands for elementary. Okay, I am not writing down completely. Elementary particles. If you Google that, you will get a very tabulated form. Inside that table, generally all these kind of elementary particles are actually placed there. Okay, that is the standard model. The particles which create the universe. So I think that's a good understandings of the elementary particles. In the next lecture, I will cover up this fundamental property of elementary particles. What are these? So this is the end then today. And if you like this video and this video is very much helpful for you, then please subscribe to my channel. Thank you.
Think basic, think logical.